I'm one of those people that I'm blessed that I've never left something I hated to go to something I loved. I've
Mm,
always left something that I liked to go to something that I loved more.
mm.
I've gone more in alignment. I've been blessed that I've never had one of those things where it's like, oh, I hate everything about this. I just dread going to work. I can't do
Right,
that. There's always been
right.
parts of it that fed my soul. But as I've moved more and more, and now with the coaching business, I feel like I'm a lot more in alignment with these are the pieces. Obviously there's still parts of a business, there's still parts of work that it's like, well, I just have to do that.
Yeah,
That's just part of the job. I just got to
yep,
do that part.
yep.
But there's more and more of it where it's like, no, this is the work that really feeds my soul and makes me
Mm.
happy and gives me joy and gives me
Yes.
energy and
Yes. Salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our goal is to inspire and empower our listeners to live their most audacious lives ever. Thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey with us. In today's episode, we're going to dive into the concept of authenticity with our guest Scott Maderer, and exploring how to be true to oneself. It's like a compass guiding us on a path to our most audacious life. Scott is a transformational coach and a stewardship of expert who has dedicated his life to helping people uncover their true calling and live authentically. With a background in teaching, leadership, and coaching, Scott brings a wealth of experience and wisdom to our conversation today. His expertise in coaching and stewardship make him a perfect guest to discuss the topics of authenticity, living in alignment with our values, and finding fulfillment in our endeavors. It's an absolutely great conversation I'm certain you'll enjoy. So without any further ado, here's my chat with Scott. Hey, Scott, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's an absolute treat to spend the time with you like this. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. Happy to come on and chat and see what we talk about today.
Yeah, that's always the $1 million question. What are we going to talk about today, right? Well,
That's just we just sit down and have coffee and chat for a little while, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, and so for me, the best part about these dialogues is exactly kind of what you alluded to is just being able to share and through just a conversation and obviously on this podcast, we encourage this best audacious life and encourage individuals to go out and be the person they're supposed to be and live authentically and in some instances, and this will sort of tap in your work, is answer their calling to be their true selves.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that if we are all living in this world where we're being the person that we're supposed to be, doing the things that we're meant to, like how dynamic and wonderful places could be. And so maybe as a starting point, because I'm sure listeners will be like, oh, this is what he's going to talk about. Maybe we can get you to sort of fill our audience in about the work that you do and what got you to the place that you're at now.
Sure. So like most of us, my life has not been a straight line. I think most of us, when we look back, it's like, wait, what? How did I get where I'm at?
Right.
And yet at the same time, I think it's one that, you're talking about living authentically, living, more in alignment with what your calling is. And I would say that my journey has brought me more and more in alignment with my calling. So way back in the beginning, right? I was born in a log cabin in Kentucky. No, wait, that's Abraham Lincoln. Sorry. Let me, I was born and raised in Texas. I still live in Texas. I've lived here my entire life. Did all of the normal stuff, went to college and all of those things. I actually went to college with the thought of I was going to become a medical researcher because I've
Okay.
always had this feeling of I want to help people. So
Gotcha.
I got degrees in science. I did all of that stuff. And I did a little bit of medical research, started doing some lab work and figured out that basically 90% of your time was spent chasing money and 10% of your time was actually doing work that helped people. And I'm like, I don't like that. So I pivoted and I became a school teacher.
Okay.
So I probably was one of the most, quote, highly qualified school teachers out there because I'm teaching sixth graders and, I have advanced degrees and have done medical research and
Right.
all of this stuff, but I'm teaching middle school. I taught high school. I did that for 16 years. And I loved teaching because I loved the part about, the pouring into the kids,
Yeah.
not just the content, but all of the other interactions you had. But
Yes.
for anyone who's been a teacher or knows teachers, it's also one of those jobs. It's emotionally draining. It's long hours. It's low pay, lots of extra stuff. There's anyway, so at some point it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
So I pivoted, and in the words of my students, I joined the dark side because I went from from teaching to testing.
Okay.
So I went to work for a testing company, and worked my way up into leadership, a corporate job, that kind of thing. Worked my up into senior leadership, ran a team of 180 people, flying all over the country, meeting with clients, doing all of that sort of thing. $44 billion budget or whatever, that kind of thing.
Right.
And spent a lot of time in airports, a lot of time on planes. Again, I loved it because in the leadership position I was in, my job was to train other leaders and bring them up and then run the team, I was a senior leader. And the part of it that I loved the most was the pouring into the other leaders. The flying across the country and meeting with the clients. It wasn't terrible. I mean, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't what really gave me energy and drove me and made me feel like, wow, this is really what I meant to do.
Right.
So about 2011, while I was still doing the corporate job, still working 60 hours a week, still doing all of those sorts of things, still on a plane, still flying all over the country, I started a coaching business on the side. And I began with financial coaching, and then over time it's morphed, and I call myself now a stewardship coach because I work in the areas of time, talent, and treasures. And in 2017, I went full time with that, left my corporate job. So I literally reversed my climb up the corporate ladder. Like I told them, I gave a year's notice in writing and said, I'm leaving in a year. We need to train my replacement, identify a replacement. I'll train them. Brought them into my position. I stepped back. I still helped them for 3 to 6 months, got them up to speed. Then I stepped down to part-time, and then I left. So it's a graceful exit, but I'm like, let me reverse this climb. By the way.
That's a great succession plan.
It's one of those. I didn't want to leave the company. Not that I was somebody that was irreplaceable. That's not my point. Obviously, I was replaceable. I replace myself, but it was more of one of those things where it's like, I wasn't leaving. I'm one of those people that I'm blessed that I've never left something I hated to go to something I loved. I've always left something that I liked to go to something that I loved more. I've gone more in alignment. I've been blessed that I've never had one of those things where it's like, oh, I hate everything about this. I just dread going to work. I can't do that. There's always been parts of it that fed my soul. But as I've moved more and more, and now with the coaching business, I feel like I'm a lot more in alignment with these are the pieces. Obviously there's still parts of a business. There's still parts of work that it's like, well, I just have to do that. That's just part of the job. I just got to do that part. But there's more and more of it where it's like, no, this is the work that really feeds my soul and makes me happy and gives me joy and gives me energy and feels authentic.
No, and that's so important to be able to not just not only just find those things, but know what they are, so you can go and find them, right? Like to look for them. And I think and that for me, I think is a really good starting point to have that conversation. We talk about authentic living because a big part of this is knowing who you are and understanding who you are, and perhaps Scott, if you could give some insights on what that process looks like for people.
So I actually work a lot with folks in that area because I tell people, my joke all the time is, it's never too late to ask the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? I don't care if you're 15, 55, or 105. If you're still sucking wind, you still should be asking that question. because it changes and it morphs and we find more information. So I'm going to give you kind of two different exercises or two different quick things that, and literally people listening, you can listen back to this when you've got some free time and a piece of paper and actually do the exercise. I like to give people something they can actually do. So the first one is looking backwards. That's as simple. This tends to work a little better if you're a little, how shall we say, of the more mature persuasion. In terms of age, looking backwards is kind of sit down and write down all of the things you've done. And I don't just mean jobs. I don't just mean careers. I don't just mean things you've been paid to do. I mean, volunteer time, relationship time, hobbies, any activity where you have spent somewhat of a significant amount of time or energy, in that. Jot those down. And then underneath each of them, just literally make a list: loved, hated. and just start brainstorming, start writing down what are things you loved about it, what are things you hated about it. And by the way, I challenge you to put at least 10 to 15 things under each of those columns.
Yep.
Because most of the time people, for some jobs it's real easy, or for some areas it's real easy to list a lot of loves or a lot of hateds.
Sure.
The other side is kind of challenging. So try to list some of both, whichever one it is, list some of the other. Okay. Because guess what? There's always stuff. Best situation in the world, there's still stuff you don't like. Worst situation in the world, there's still stuff that you were blessed by. So look for those. And then what you want to do is just start looking for patterns. Right. Start circling things that are in common. Start highlighting, use different colored highlighters.
Yes.
All the stuff. Oh, look, this thing, when I get to do this, it showed up in 3 different places or 4 different places or 5 different places.
Yeah.
Oh, this thing that I don't like, that doesn't give me energy, it showed up in 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 places. And then it's a matter of sort of beginning to create a picture of, okay, what moves me more towards those things I love, and it could be a change in career. It could be a change in location. It could be a change in relationship. It could be, there's probably going to be some change needed, but you've at least got a direction now that you kind of want to head.
Yes.
So the other one is the looking forward exercise. So this one is, you almost have to pretend that it's 5 years in the future. So here's the question that I like to ask people, because it's a scenario that most of us can kind of picture. Imagine for a minute, you're walking through an airport. You're about to catch your plane, and as you get to the gate, up it pops, sure enough, delayed. Plane's not leaving for 4 hours. So you do what everyone does in an airport when you've suddenly got a 4-hour delay. You go find a restaurant or a bar to sit down and have a bite or have a drink, whichever it is for you. You're going to pick one of those, and you're going to go find a place to do it. So as you're walking into the restaurant or into the place, you look over and you see a friend that you haven't seen for 5 years.
Okay.
You walk over, hey, how you doing? They go, I am doing great. How are you? Awesome. And they look at you and they say, how has your life been these last 5 years? And remember, this is 5 years in the future. And as you answer them, you say, this has been the best 5 years of my life, because your job is to write what comes after the word because. Put it down on paper, talk. Well, right. This is one of those that I've actually found a lot of people, it's good, like take your phone, turn on your recorder, go for a walk and just talk. What are the things that would show up in your life that would make you honestly say to somebody, this has been the best 5 years of my life? What's happened in your career? What's happened in your relationships? What's happened in your financial life? What's happened in your spiritual life? And I'm not saying don't write down something like, I won the lottery. No, even if I won the lottery. Great, but what did that allow you to do? What changed in your life because of that? Because guess what? Winning the lottery doesn't actually change your life.
Right. Adding depth is really what you're talking about. Like, let's go deeper. Right.
Go deeper than just the surface. It's not, don't create a bullet list of these 7 things happen. No, talk about why. How does it make you feel? What did it allow you to do? Because what we're trying to get at with both of these is that emotional level connection to calling, to what direction you're supposed to be going into, what gives you life, what gives you energy. You're trying to get down deeper and get to, not a checklist of these are the 7 things I want to do in my life, but rather this is what feeds me, and what feeds you is emotional. It's not it's not this, it's this, right? It's not head, it's heart. It's the things that are deeper inside that actually feed your soul.
Funny as you give that, and thank you for that, because I do agree with you. It's the things that feed you, and the things that get you excited. And I can remember, so we talked earlier offline about, I've been podcasting for a real long time, and I remember I was in my full-time job. I was working in this sort of change management area, and we're talking about how we can influence the environment and work organization positively, and bring about change, and how we help individuals through this process. And one of the ideas that had come up was, is really, we were talking about increasing engagement. And so one of the ideas that had come up was, hey, let's create a podcast. Well, I remember what that did for me because again, I podcast for a very long time. Was something I enjoy doing. And I just remember how excited I got. And again, the wheels started turning and you start going. So that's really what you're talking about, is finding those things that get you in that zone, in that space. Because, and I believe, and I'm sure I'd love to get your thoughts, but I believe that certainly when you're in that space where you're excited about what you're doing and you're feeling good about it, the creative juices are flowing. You add more. The value you bring is increased. You're happy. There's all sorts of really fulfilling things come out of being close to those things that get you excited.
Absolutely. It's twofold. I mean, there's kind of two sides to the coin. One is when you're living that life and doing those things that feed you, give you energy, or more authentic to what you're supposed to be doing. Like you said, it's a positive feedback loop, right? It gives you energy, which means you're more creative, which means you're going to work a little harder, which means you're going to spend a little bit more time. And it doesn't feel like, think about it. All of us have entered those states where you're doing something, they call it the flow state, right? Where you get into that thing where it's just like, you look up and it's like, wait, it's been 4.5 hours. What the heck happened? And it happens at different points in our life, but you're more likely to enter those sorts of energy states because your energy is coming back to you. It's feeding into you.
Right.
It gives you the energy to keep going. The other side of that coin is when you do have those things that are the parts of the work that you have to do that are difficult, because change is hard. Yes. Even change that we want is hard. Yes. Yes. And it's the thing that gives you the drive to go through that and through that discomfort and through that uncertainty and through that fear. Because if you're launching a new thing, if you're trying a new thing, the first time you did a podcast episode, right? If you can cast your mind back to that, there's a part of you that's like, why am I doing this?
I vividly recall. And yes, it was, yes.
I don't know. Most podcasters will tell you like the first episode that they released is actually like the 10th one they recorded, because a lot of times they'll record half a dozen to a dozen and they listen back to, oh, I hate that. I can't release that, even though it's perfectly fine. It's honestly, it was, but we tend to not do that. And that could go with anything, any part of our life. We have that tendency to hold ourselves back and that doing those things that give you energy and are more authentic, you're more likely to overcome that initial blockage, that initial fear, and you're more likely to stick to it over time.
Right.
And guess what? Over time, that's where the success comes from. Again, go look for overnight successes. I'm an overnight success after 40 years.
That's right. That's right. 40 years of 200 attempts, right? No. And it's funny, time is a wonderful tool in all this, because it's that factor. It gives you that proof after you do something over time that, I can do this. And so the key and underlying message is really stick with it. Like just stick with
consistency and all of that is so important.
Yeah. So and those two strategies on understanding ourselves is so important. And I think those are great takeaways for people to be able to do. The other part to that, to get to where we want to go, is still finding that activity, still landing on that thing. That thing could be already in your list that you identified, or when you went back and said, here's what I've done the last 5 years, that thing could be there, but it could be somewhere new that comes out of that list, right? Like there's go a bunch of different ways, couldn't it?
Yeah, it becomes, so again, background is science. So I'm going to use science language, right? Okay. It becomes this process of experimentation too, right? Where you're putting things out there and you're getting data back. You get information back. And by the way, that's a great frame, because when I tried that first podcast, I'm just getting data. I'm not succeeding or failing. I'm just finding out. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Does anyone else listen? Oh, look, I got one downloaded. Thanks, Mom. That kind of thing, right? It's whatever it is, you're getting data, you're getting information, you're finding out more, and you're testing it. So I talk about, whether, and this works at a number of different levels. This works kind of at a life level, but this also can work down like at a daily plan level. So it's think Russian nesting dolls, right? It's the same framework, different scales. So I talk about doing plan. Okay. So what action am I going to take? What next step am I going to take? Doesn't have to be big. Could be tiny. Doesn't matter. What next action am I going to take? Plan, execute, Okay, that means do something.
Right.
Okay, it's all well and good to have a plan. You don't actually do anything, nothing happens. So
Yes.
2 is execute. The third is review. That means sit down and go, what happened?
Yes.
What was
Yes.
good about it? What was bad about it? What progress did I make? What feedback did I get? What worked? What didn't work? Whatever, right? Review. The next one is revise. Okay, which
Mhm.
means based on what I just learned,
Yes.
do I now need to do something different, or do I
Right.
need to just repeat the same thing? Is
Yes.
it now we're in the consistency stage, or that wasn't quite it? Maybe I need to pivot a little bit. And then the after you revise it, the last one is repeat it, right? Go back
Right.
to the beginning again. You've got a new plan, or
Right.
you've got the same plan and now you're repeating it. And again, that can work at a lot of different goal setting levels, right?
Yep.
You can do that with annual goals, you can do that monthly, quarterly, you can do that daily. You can just do it with like what we were talking about with, you do the career exercise and you sit down and you're like, hey, here's some things that I feel like I like. Okay, great. Now how can I go out and do more of that and get more feedback and figure out,
Right.
yep, that's
Yep.
good. I tell people I started my podcast with the commitment of doing it for 6 months
Okay.
to see if I figured it out or not, whether I liked it or not.
Yeah.
And I've been,
Right.
I'm at like 1,500 episodes now. My joke is I still haven't figured out if I like it, so
Still
I
trying to
haven't
land
quit
on
yet
it.
because I haven't figured it out yet, but
That's
I
awesome.
just had that commitment. I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm going to get some information. I'm going to find out if I like it. Guess what I do now? The way I do the podcast today
Yep.
is not exactly the same way I did it
Right.
back when I started it.
Well, and that's because you revised it, right? You
I
went through
revised.
and you revised it. You said, "I like this. When I did this work. When I didn't do this, I wasn't thrilled with it. Let me change it and see it." And you're right. Like we go through different variations of our the stuff that we do. So and I can connect with you on the podcasting because I've done the same thing.
Done the
Like,
same thing, right?
okay, I don't like this opening music. Let's find new music. I don't like when I do this. Let's change that. I don't want to change this graphic. Like and that's all good. That's part of it.
Mm-hmm. And it's that constant growing and learning. So it is consistency of you're doing, but the consistency is more of the process than the
Okay.
action, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
It does.
The consistency is on all components of your life, where you kind of constantly going through that revision and growth process. If you're doing that, then you're growing,
Right.
because and I'm a firm believer of, if you aren't growing, you're actually not just stagnating, you're sliding backwards.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'll just use the health example because that's an easy one for most people to understand. Let's say you start exercising, you get fit, you're eating right, you're doing all of the right things, you get in the best shape of your life, and then you just stop all of it.
Right.
And you go back to eating junk food and back to not exercising and back to sitting on the couch. You don't just maintain the same fitness level, you go backwards, right? You go
Yes.
back to the old self. Same thing happens in all the other areas of our life. If we're not constantly working on our relationships, if we're not constantly working on our career, if we're not constantly working on our finances, and working here doesn't have to be painful either. I
Right.
think a lot
Right.
of times we hear the word work and we're like, oh, I gotta work. And
Yeah.
no. There's things
Oh,
you can do to make it fun and easy and
yes.
enjoyable, or at
Yes.
least tolerable,
Yes. Yes.
but you don't have to. Work doesn't mean pain, but work does
No.
mean effort. It does mean
No.
putting energy into it so that it keeps moving forward.
Well, and what's so good about, again, the previous conversation we had about finding the things that you love. So if you know that this is a job that you have and you've got these 6 tasks, and 3 of the tasks are painful for you, but 3 you really like enjoying, right? Or you enjoy doing. If you can find ways of mixing them in, maybe it's like, if I get to the 3 things I really hate, then I could jump to the 3 things I like a lot. Or maybe you reverse it and you start with the 3 things you like that can give you energy to work through the things that you don't like doing.
Right.
Like there's ways you can do that, but I think what's important is going back, and that's why the exercise of knowing who the heck you are is so important.
Right. And even beyond that, not only can you structure your day differently, or
Yep.
group your tasks differently, but you also can ask questions like, okay, here's the part of this job or this career that I don't like. Is there a way I can figure out where
Right.
I'm the one that doesn't have to do that? can you delegate it? Can you, and again, depending on your position and how long you've been doing it, and, is it your business, or is it you're working for somebody else? There may be challenges around how you can do it. But you know what? I have actually found, even in like a corporate environment, where if you can make a good argument, for why these are the things I should do, and these are the things I should delegate to somebody else, and you find the person that the stuff, you hate, you're delegating it to somebody that's like, dude, give me more of this. I love it.
Right.
All of a sudden now everyone's winning. Everyone's
Yes.
actually doing the stuff that they love, that gives them
Yes.
energy. The company operates better. The customers are happy. The employers are happy. The owner's happy. Everyone becomes a winner in that situation. So rather than look for, win-lose, look for ways to make it win-win. And depending on your situation, a lot of times you can figure out ways to make some of the things that you don't love into things that maybe are okay, either by
Right.
delegation, by automation, by, there's a lot of different techniques, right? But you can inject something that's like, oh, wow, instead of this being a 7-hour painful task, I can do this in 20 minutes.
Right.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, now it's not so painful anymore. It's not that big of a deal.
And now you're getting the productivity, right? Like that's right. You get more out of this. And so, and you save time, you get better results. And as you said, everyone wins.
And you have more energy, and you go home happier, which then spills over into your relationships and your other, that's the other thing is we're not separate zones. We're one integral person.
Yep.
And so, when you hate your job and everything stinks at work, guess what? That spills over into every other area of your life, right. And by the same token, when you love your job and you love that begins to spill over into other areas of your life. If you're more productive in one place, I work with a lot of people, financial coaching, time productivity coaching, these different areas. Yep. And it's hilarious because I'll be working with someone in one area, we're working on finances. That's what we're concentrating now. And they come back and they're like, I'm losing weight. Why am I losing weight? And it's like, well, because when you get disciplined in one area of your life, that naturally awesome. Spills over into other areas of your life. Awesome. No trick, and by the same token, if you get healthier, a lot of times your finances start getting a little better, and it's just because we are a integral person. We're one being. And so discipline in one area or energy in one area naturally gives energy to others and gives discipline to others.
Yep. Those secondary benefits that we never saw coming. So I get it.
Unintended consequences, and they can be good, they can be bad.
Right.
They're going to be there.
Got you. So when we talk about sort of, living out your calling and being authentic and living that person you're supposed to be, you very, very focused because you also work with Christian men and couples. I want to talk about that piece of it. And so it's very, very targeted, right?
Sure. And a lot of, and now to be clear, some of my clients are not Christian.
Right.
But that is my worldview. And that is kind of the worldview that I come at these things through, is the idea of stewardship, the idea that we are given blessings, we are given things, and our job is not to own them, but to manage them. That's the simplistic definition of what stewardship means.
I love that.
And it can be anything that we have, it can be our relationships, it can be our career, it can be our money, it could be whatever. Those are all things that we're just gifted them. We don't own them. By the way, anyone who thinks they own it, just go to the funeral home and see whether that's still there when the person's in the casket, because it's not.
Right.
The old joke of the guy says he died a multimillionaire, and he's like, I don't believe it. I'm gonna take it with me. I demand that my money be in my casket when I'm buried. And the guy's like, well, pastor, did you do it? And the pastor's like, yeah, I wrote him a check. So the check's in the casket, so it's all good. That kind of thing, right? We don't own it. It's temporary. And because it's temporary, our job is to manage it. And if that's our job, well, then if we look up and we're saying things like, I just don't have enough time to do the thing that's important to me. By the way, change the language, say it this way: that's not a priority for me. All of a sudden, when you're saying, I don't have enough time to go to the doctor to get my checkup, that feels like I'm busy. But if I
Right.
say it's not a priority for me to go to my doctor and get a checkup, that's like, ooh, wait, no, that kind of, no, I don't
Right.
like saying that out loud. That
Right.
feels different. So, we say those things, or, I don't have enough money to do the things, or I'm deeply, using my money in ways that aren't really in alignment with what I believe and what I feel is important. I say this is important, but then when I look at my calendar and when I look at my checkbook, those things aren't showing up.
Right.
Then you're not really living like those things are important. And so that worldview turns out, in my case, it comes from my Christian upbringing, but it also turns out that that's really in common with a lot of, a lot of other people and a lot of other religions and a lot of other views.
Right.
So all of my clients kind of have that worldview. They may or may not expressly be Christian, but they tend to be spiritual. They tend to believe in a higher power, and they tend to believe that, we're called to manage those resources, not just own them.
Got you. I love that. I love that. Manage them. That's a really good way of thinking, because you're absolutely correct. I mean, all that we have here, even even the non-tangible gifts that we have, we use them while we're here, and that's it. That's it. And
They're temporary.
right.
I've written a book, and in a way people say, writing a book is, a way to live on past you. No, not really. Just some words on a page.
That's right. That's right.
Still not me.
That's right. And what's funny, as we move to this digital space, right? And
Even more
it
temporary.
becomes digital, and digital. I mean, I can pull a plug and everything I'm gone is gone. Like, I mean,
Right.
it's right. So it's
People are complaining now about, digital products, and then the server goes down, and
yeah.
now you no longer own that digital product. It's
That's right.
disappeared. It's gone.
That's right. That's right. So absolutely, I think the time that we're here on this earth, it's incumbent on us to use our skills, our gifts, and our abilities to their full potential to make the impact that they're supposed to make.
Absolutely. And again, that's the worldview that's in common. Now, I use the language of stewardship and Christian, which are kind of, they're buzzwords, but at the same time, I tell people, so I niche more from psychographics than demographics. In other words, I really don't care what age you are. I don't care what sex you are. To some extent, I don't care what religion you are, but I do care that you have that worldview of, I'm trying to manage the resources to the best of my ability. I'm trying to grow them for the benefit of not just myself, but for those people around me, for my family, for my friends, for even the people I serve, that kind of thing. A lot of my clients are small business owners, but not 100%. A lot of my clients are Christian, but not 100%.
Right.
I've actually worked with clients in 16 countries, so all over the world.
There you go.
So all sorts of different backgrounds. But at the same time, we all have that, what I'm looking for in a great client is that growth mindset, that abundance mindset, that management mindset, those sorts of things. So
continuous learning,
it's mindset. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, those are really the starting point. Because if you refuse to want to learn, or refuse to want to grow, then there's nothing no one can do for you until you're ready to get there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that is not a healthy coaching client. The expression I use is, I don't want to push a rope. Part of my job as a coach is sometimes I'm your cheerleader, sometimes I'm your butt kicker, sometimes I'm, whatever, right? I fill a lot of different roles. Sometimes I'm sometimes I'm giving advice, usually not. A lot of coaching is not advising and not telling you what to do, but helping you to do it.
Yeah.
And then, accountability and all of these sorts of words show up. But what I don't want to have to do is, push. If I want the client's success more than the client wants their success, something's wrong. That is not healthy.
Well, I think you've moved out of a coaching relationship at that point. You're into something else.
Yeah, it's not coaching at that point. It's
that's right.
And again, you may need somebody like that in your life, but that's not going to be a coach. That's going to be something different.
Yeah. Scott, this has been really, really good. But before we go, I know you touched on your book. I wonder if you just let people know the book. You got, you see the graphic behind you there, and the word, the symbol. I'm trying. You tilt your head to the right or left. I could probably see that. Except the puzzle you call, like, by mastering your time, your talent, and your treasures. I got it all out.
Yeah. So I for the people that are listening just to audio, that's like I just had to duck out of frame so you can read the frame picture behind me. So I've got a book coming out in July 2nd of 2024. If you're listening to this, 4 years from now, it's out for pre-sale now, up on all of the places that books are found. Basically what I wanted to do is a lot of what we've been talking about today. I wanted to take about 35 years worth of stuff,
Yeah.
that's kind of in my head, and get it down on paper in a framework that people could actually take action on.
Yes.
And you'll notice, by the way, I keep using words like framework and process and
Yep.
system. I'm very systems minded, process minded, framework minded.
Yep.
I don't like giving people something that it's like, here's the one thing, this only works in this specific situation, and if you're not in that box, forget it. It won't work for you.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to give you something that no matter where you are, if you're
That's
kind
right.
of at that point where you're trying to figure out what's next,
Yes.
this will work.
That process will get you there.
Whether you're on step 52 and you're trying to figure out what's next, or you're in step 0.1 and you're trying to figure out what's next, the framework works.
And what I like about that is the entry point can be at different places, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's really what the book was, is if you're trying to live an inspired life, if you're trying to move more in that direction of, authenticity, alignment, those words that you used at the beginning of the show, audacious, then this is a framework that helps move you along that process from wherever you are. So some of the exercises we talked about today are in there. There's a whole bunch more. There's a lot of resources there and different tools and techniques to move you. And then we dive into those 3 areas of time, talent, and treasures, and kind of give some specifics around, if productivity is the area that's holding you back, here's some things you can try. If money is the thing that's holding you back, here's some things you can try. If it's, more of that fear, that mindset, that communication piece, that leadership piece, here's some things you could try.
Amazing. Scott, this is so awesome. And I very, very much appreciate your process in terms of how you help people get to where they need to get to. And again, now pushing a rope, I think that's a beautiful analogy, what we're talking about, because it's individuals on their own have to decide for themselves that it's time to get to where they have to get to. We're all on a different path. We're all on a different journey. And the biggest, thing, I believe the most detrimental thing that we can do for ourselves is compare our journey to someone else's, right? Yep. We're not all the same. I will get to where I need to get to when I'm supposed to get to, as will you. And that's just the bottom line, really. And anything else, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Absolutely. Yeah. The comparison trap is a big one. And you hear people say, don't compare the beginning of your journey with the middle of someone else's or the end of someone else's. I'll go further than that. Don't even compare the beginning of your journey to the beginning of someone else's, because
that's right.
You don't come at it with the same, biology, the same genetics, the same mindset, the same environment, the same operating system, whatever, nothing, no 2 human beings, even identical twins, born in the same house, raised in the same environment.
That's right.
Anyone knows a set of identical twins. They are not exactly the same people, by the time they reach 20, it's like, wow, okay. There'll be things they have in common, but there'll also be things that are different. And so at no point are you ever going to be in exactly the same place as someone else. And again, that's one of the reasons that I love frameworks and processes and systems and that kind of thing, is because those work regardless, but then I don't have to worry about, Bob's at this point and Susie's at that point, Sam's at that point, because the framework applies regardless. It's just like you said, maybe Bob's going to take a little longer. Okay. Who cares?
Cool.
That's not a judgment. That's just how long it took Bob.
That's right. That's right. Well, you're absolutely right. Scott, for our listeners who want to learn more about you or catch up with you, where can we send them?
So I actually set up a page just for your listeners. It has some free resources, some free gifts, some things that they can download. Again, if you're feeling kind of stuck in those 3 areas, time, talent, and treasures, I've got resources for all 3. It's actually got information about my book and some, my podcast and all of that sort of thing. So anything that they're pretty much, the only thing on there that costs you money is if you do want to pre-buy the book. Yes, that actually costs money. Everything else is free. And if you'll go over to inspiredstewardship.com/audacious, should be easy to remember. It's just inspiredstewardship.com/audacious. You can find all of those resources and all of those gifts there.
Amazing. This is great. Scott, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time, and keep up the good work, my friend.
Absolutely. I love doing it. I love being on. You're a wonderful host. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. All the best. Back we are here on the podcast, and during our enlightening discussion with Scott, we learned that by embracing stewardship in all areas of our lives, we can lead more fulfilling and purpose-driven existences. To learn more from Scott and benefit from his coaching services that he offers, feel free to connect with him directly. Of course, the contact details are provided in the show notes below. Scott, he might actually offer some special coaching packages and programs available for interested listeners. So be sure to check out the show notes, again, for more information and take advantage of these offerings. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you've enjoyed the episode and you want to hear more, certainly you can promote this podcast by liking it, sharing with a friend, or following and liking. All these good things help us because it allows the podcast to grow and spread inspiration to even more individuals. So stay audacious until next time. Remember to live boldly and authentically in all that you do.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.